Welcome to Legal Video Resource. I'm Jason Wheatholter. In this video, we're taking a look at some video-specific essentials to have in your deposition kit. We've already talked about what you need to get started as a deposition videographer. Your basic kit includes camera, mixer, microphones, backdrop, backup recorder, the accessories, you need a laptop and some post-production software. But what are some other video essentials that you need in your kit beyond just this core equipment? Well, the first thing you need is additional media. Whatever media that you're recording onto, whether those are SD cards or tapes or hard drives, always have backups in place. And kind of think about anything critical, anything that you couldn't do your job with. If that failed, have a backup for it. Now, you can take that a little bit too far sometimes and have backups for backups and backups for days, but think about the things that you have that are absolutely necessary for you to get through your job. Obviously, your camera is something absolutely necessary to get through your job as a deposition videographer, and so it might make sense to have a backup camera on location, or if you work in an office that's full of videographers, have a backup camera that's a few minutes away. But one thing you definitely need backups for that will, unfortunately, likely fail at some point is media, what you're recording the deposition onto. And this is why it's so important to have a backup recorder, is because media does fail. It's one of those things that gets used and reused over and over. And so it eventually does fail just because it gets used so much. So have a plan for kind of recycling it, but also have backup media in your kit ready to go. So if something does go wrong with one piece, you can simply swap in another. Something else to have in your kit are batteries. Now, typically as a deposition videographer, you're not going to run off of battery power, but if something comes up and suddenly you've lost power in the room, but there's plenty of sun and light to continue the deposition, everybody might want to continue the deposition. And so you need to have some batteries, at least to be able to hold you over for a little while until power comes back up. Similar to that, you need a surge protector, maybe a battery backup, but definitely extension cords. And these are all video essentials because they make your kit work. If you didn't have this kind of stuff, you couldn't really work in every single room, because some rooms that you're going to be working in as a deposition videographer, there will be power in the table, especially in more modern conference rooms. There's power connectivity right in the conference room table itself. But if you're in an older building or in an older office, there might not be power in the table. And if it's an older building, it might not be up to most current codes. So power outlets might be few and far between. On top of that, electrical, especially older electrical, can lead to power surges and brownouts. And so you want a surge protector in place to protect your equipment. So if something does happen, if you do get a spike or maybe you lose power, at least all of your equipment is not going to, or probably not going to, get damaged because you have that surge protector in place. A battery backup is another great option. It's not something that's necessarily essential to a kit, but it's another great option because a battery backup, it's much bigger than a typical camera battery or a backup recorder battery, but it'll power your whole kit, and it'll power your whole kit for a long time, because especially if you have a more modern kit with a smaller camera, a tapeless camera, and an LCD or LED monitor, they're not going to draw a ton of power. Your microphone's 48 volt phantom power. It's not going to draw a ton of power. So a battery backup will actually last you for a long time. Kind of along with extension cords, make sure you carry extra cables for all of your gear. XLR cables, HDMI cables, SDI cables, power connection cables if you can. Carry some extra cables with you, especially on the audio side, because you never know, you might end up in a room with a lot more length to the table than you expected. And so you need some extra cables to connect. Or maybe you need to connect to another piece of equipment. Maybe you're splitting your headphone output and sending one to the court reporter as an option, just as a courtesy. You're going to need the extra cables to kind of handle those situations. So have some extra cables around. One other essential that I cannot stress enough is gaffer's tape. And this is not duct tape, this is not Scotch tape, this is not, painter's tape. This is a special kind of tape that does a really great job of being really sticky, but it also doesn't peel paint or stain or anything off of. It's pretty non-destructive. And gaffer's tape can solve so many problems. I think it was an early deposition that I was involved in. I think that the plate that the camera mounted to broke. And so the camera was kind of sitting on the tripod, but really precariously. And it was kind of able to fix the problem by taping the camera to the tripod, or taping the plate that the camera was on, even though the mechanism that locked it in place was kind of broken. I was able to tape that camera in place, and it lasted throughout the entire deposition, or at least I think for an hour or two before I got a replacement plate from somebody at the office. A tripod plate is something you don't expect to break, or the mechanism you don't expect to break. And I don't remember all the details of what happened. I just remember it wasn't locking, or it wasn't sticking in place like it should, or it wasn't as stable as it should have been. And so to make sure it was stable, I used gaffer's tape to tape that camera down onto the tripod, so that way it was much more stable. Gaffer's tape you can use for all kinds of different problem-solving kind of situations. If you're not doing deposition video, but maybe need to hide a microphone, you can hide microphones in clothing using gaffer's tape. In fact, that's what's going on right here. So there's a microphone. And the way that that's adhered in the shirt is a couple pieces of gaffer's tape on both sides that are keeping it in place and keeping it from moving around. You can use gaffer's tape to, maybe you have a really annoying little slit or some holes in blinds, and you have this light coming through, and it's just this little, not even, maybe it's a foot or two long, but it's just like 1/8 of an inch wide, this little slit. And so this light is just creating like this laser beam on your witness almost. You can take gaffer's tape and just tape over that spot, and suddenly that blocks all that light coming in. There was a deposition that I was in where gaffer's tape became really important because there was a skylight, and the skylight, where it was placed, and there were actually a couple in the room, so there was no good way to get away from it. But right around 3 o'clock, this light came in perfectly, and so it was just hitting the shoulder of the witness. Another area was going to be like right on their face, but in this seat in particular, it just hit their shoulder. And so what I did was take some gaffer's tape and just some regular 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper and tape them to the ceiling right next to that skylight, and it blocked that light so it didn't hit that witness's shoulder, and my image looked a lot better. But you can use gaffer's tape for a lot of different reasons. You can tape microphone cables down to the table, tape them under a table. You can use gaffer's tape to block out an area on a table where you want somebody to set something or not set something. There's lots of different reasons, but gaffer's tape is definitely an essential that you need to have in your kit at all times. Thank you so much for joining me today as we talked about video essentials for your deposition kit. If you found this video helpful, I encourage you, click subscribe down below, because as we post new content to this channel, you'll be the first to know about it. Also, if you have a comment or a question, maybe something you think is essential that we didn't cover, let us know in the comments down below. We'll talk about those and maybe use them in a later video. Again, thanks so much for joining us. We will see you next time on Legal Video Resource.